All righty. Welcome to our final Mythologium panel, everyone. Our next speaker is Dr. Andrea Slominski, and her presentation is titled Social Distancing and Our Return to Hestia, Our Collective Heroine's Journey to the Underworld to Heal, Liberate, and Reclaim the Archetypal Feminine. Dr. Slominski is a cultural mythologist, women's midlife coach, author, teacher, and speaker. Dr. A is the creator of the Midlife Reboot Method, a program developed to guide women to recreate themselves and rediscover their true north at midlife. She has been a featured workshop facilitator and speaker at women's events and conferences. Dr. A also teaches women's entrepreneurship for the Women's Economic Ventures in Santa Barbara, California. Her most recent published work includes a guest blog entitled The Rise of Regency for Dr. Carol Pearson and Bearing the Unbearable, which is an essay in If I Don't Make It, I Love You, Survivors in the Aftermath of School Shootings. Her podcast, The Regent's Room, is launching soon. Looking forward to hear about that. Please welcome Dr. Slominski.
Well, good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you to the Fates and Graces for putting together this amazing conference. I had to work a little bit this weekend, so I cannot wait to get all of the recordings and be able to sink deeper into the well and see what you all had to say. Thinking about film and myth, I initially wrote a different proposal, and then COVID-19 happened. And I was like, if anybody had written a spec script or a pitch on what life has been like in this country since 2016, coming up to today, no one would have believed it. It would have been farcical, unbelievable. You would have been laughed out of the pitch room, but yet here we are. So I really wanted to address the really strong feelings that I had about what I think is archetypally going on culturally for us and the opportunities that I think it affords us as a nation and as the world that I think and hope that we will all take advantage of, or those in power will take advantage of. All right, so on March 19th, 2020, for those of you who live in California, you know this very well, Governor Newsom issued a stay-at-home order for all of California. By April 6th, 42 states had announced mandatory stay-at-home orders. More than 90% of the US population was under shelter-in-place directives during the first COVID-19 shutdown. Everyone was told, go home. Go home and shelter in place. We're all in this together and alone together are two of the phrases and memes that took over all forms of social media in March. In the past 4 months, COVID-19 has accomplished what spiritual teachers and religions have been trying to do for millennia. It has, with merciless efficiency, demonstrated that we are all connected and just how dependent we are on one another for survival. The virus erased community, state, and national boundaries in the blink of an eye, and hierarchies and social structures were turned upside down as well. Suddenly, grocery clerks, truck drivers, UPS delivery and FedEx drivers, postal workers, takeout chefs, Postmate drivers, and Instacart shoppers were now the essential workers in the United States. Since the pandemic began, 38.6 million people have applied for unemployment, and 5.4 million have lost their health insurance. Safer at home, shelter at home, stay home were the messages we received hourly as governments and healthcare workers desperately tried to flatten the curve of the spreading pandemic. Since that initial stay-at-home order, states have reopened too soon, cities have reopened too soon, and the virus has come roaring back until here we are, possibly on the verge of another shutdown, depending on which expert you listen to. The accusations surrounding who's responsible, the lack of planning and incompetence fill the digiverse. Although the answers and strategies for getting control of the pandemic are vital to all of our lives, these are not the focus of what I want to talk to you about today. I want to take a look at going home, at being forced to go home and stay there. The shuttering of businesses, social distancing, The guidelines for social distancing, stay-at-home mandates forced us all to go home. We've been pushed back to home and hearth, the ancient mythological foundation of Greek culture and the realm of Hestia. Looking at this return to home from a mythological perspective allows us to look at the big picture, to look at the universal experiences of this extraordinary time. Through the lens of mythology, we can look beyond our constant anxiety, fear, and uncertainty to see the universal experiences of being human. Myths let us know that we're not alone and that the events we experience in our lives are often repeating human patterns, and they give us insight into our nature. In the mythology of ancient Greece, the goddess of the home, the hearth, the larder, the center of family life and culture, and the center of the earth itself is Hestia. Hestia and the hearth and the fire in it. She is not just the idea of home, she is actually the fire, she is the hearth itself, she is the spirit of home, where a family gathers and finds its center. As a goddess, she never married or had children, and she never left the home. She's the energy that we relish in family reunions, if we cherish our family of origin. In meals shared around the table with our families of origin, or better yet, our chosen families. And she's also the energy and the warmth within holiday gatherings. The name Hestia also signified the center of the earth, which the Greeks believed contained the earth's center and its fire. To neglect the energies of Hestia is to ignore the heart and center of life. And now, we've all been directed to return together to the realm of Hestia. Hestia's energies springing from the archetypal feminine bring with her the images of feminine energy from the unknown depths of the unconscious, such as the Great Mother, the circle, the moon, the universe, the cave, the womb, and darkness, to list, of course, just a few. The archetypal feminine manifests through the connection of consciousness with and through these symbols and images. We embody it by experiencing the receptive and nurturing qualities of the earth, the dynamics of codependent origination, relationship, intuition, creativity, nurturance, compassion, the cycles of the natural world, and the immanence of divinity. The world has been driven back to the realm of Hestia at a time when we lack relationship and compassion, when cultural, religious, and socioeconomic differences have divided us into ever smaller competing factions. We've been driven back to Hestia at a time when we are destroying the very ecosystems on our planet that sustain our lives. The archetypal masculine world of logos includes rationalism, logic, and by extension, science and commerce. Logo images humanity as transcendent and claims mastery and control over the natural world. Yet, it has been stopped in its tracks by an invisible virus, and science, rationalism, and commerce have been refocused on defeating this one invisible thing. At home, in retreat from a deadly pandemic, we are face to face with our own mortality. We're sheltering in close quarters for extended period of time, straining our relationships. We're fearful of the threat to our lives and the lives of those we love. And we're confronted daily with our faults, frailties, and complexes. Fear, denial, a lack of leadership, and uncertainty are tearing at the fabric of our society, from the foundations of our economic systems to our beleaguered healthcare system. This pandemic is an alchemist's fire that will in due time show us who we really are. The forces that have brought us home are forcing us into the mythic underworld of our worst nightmares. Very reminiscent of Dante's Circles of Hell, the images of hospitals from around the world show the gravely ill kept alive by machines and the dead stacking up in refrigerated trucks and ice rinks. Morgues are full and we cannot bury the dead, nor can we gather to mourn them. Scientists, researchers, doctors, and essential workers on the front lines have been heroically working. They're keeping what's left of the economy running, helping the sick, researching and questing after a cure, and hoping for a vaccine. While the majority of America stayed safer at home, these essential workers embarked on the hero's journey. They answered the call to adventure and sacrifice. Leaving their castles and citadels of medicine, they go out into the world to fight the dragon, to find the golden fleece, and to bring back the boon to the world. In the lives of these vital frontline workers, we can see Campbell's classic stages in their individual journeys. Taking up the fight against the virus, the hero ventures forth and comes to the threshold of adventure. Crossing the threshold, the hero descends into the other world, or the underworld, in their quest for the boon. As we know, each hero's battle, descent, and adventure, helpers, challenges, ultimate triumph, and return for each of them and their circumstances is individual. Physicians, scientists, and researchers who have taken up the call to suppress, treat, and cure COVID-19 are in the world of the underworld that with full ICUs, ventilators, indiscriminate death, and a rapidly insurgent pandemic. They are out there heroically questing in the world. As for the rest of us, safer at home, I offer that we are on a collective heroine's journey, and our boon is no less important: the reclamation and restoration of the conscious feminine. The first days and weeks of lockdown saw people busying themselves with all manners of distractions, bread baking, puzzles, what have you. Soon, however, it became apparent to many that a divestiture was occurring. Like Inanna, many were stripped of the magic talismans that kept their former lives afloat. And as we fell deeper and deeper into the underworld, millions lost their jobs, their income, and the identities attached to them. Children lost school and the daily connection with their teachers and friends. College students were forced home after their first taste of independence. We lost the social interaction of work. Many essential workers, often earning a low wage, were forced to continue working, putting themselves, their families, and communities at high risk for illness and death. The new demands of homeschooling, social distancing, cooking, and cleaning for stressed out, imbalanced households stripped any remaining normalcy from our lives. Spending 24/7 alone for weeks and weeks, or spending 24/7 with those who you usually saw only 4 to 6 hours a day, finally dealt the death blow to normalcy, and our former lives were hung on a Reshkadal's hook. The stress of those isolating alone has highlighted our lack of cultural compassion and connection, as well as our inadequate safety net for the elderly, the disabled, and the lonely. For those isolating with a group or family, this time has brought out the worst in many of us. Our complexes and projections wrestle daily with those projected upon us. Our faults, frailties, fears, and exhaustion from living under mortal danger for so long literally have exhausted our brains and our psyches. We've been forced into unrelenting, immediate relationship with ourselves, our needs, and those of others. The plethora of time now available to us meat-hooked our too busy lives, revealing to some the immediate need for a paradigm shift, and to others, further reinforcing the current concretized paradigm of us and them, partisan politics, alternative facts, and magical thinking. 2 months after the lockdown began, George Floyd was murdered by police in Minneapolis. Like Dante, we again went levels deeper into the underworld, prompted to look at our history and our shame. His death sparked a conflagration that was fueled by hundreds of years of slavery, brutality, murder, and the oppression of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the US. People of all races and ages filled the streets, risking exposure to COVID-19, protesting systemic racism, social and environmental injustice, and social and educational economic inequality in American life. The perfect storm of COVID-19, social unrest, and protest highlighted our national legacy of racism and inequality. It was all painfully reflected in the lives of Black bus drivers and low-wage essential workers who had to go to work in LA, Detroit, New York, and Miami to feed their families, and who died from the coronavirus. A larger percentage of COVID infections and deaths occur in the BIPOC communities. These protests further revealed how dangerously out of balance our patriarchal, logos-oriented, capitalist system has become. How do we rationalize more tax deductions for businessmen's lunches, more money for the Pentagon, and no unextended unemployment for the 36.8 unemployed American people? The mythos that connects us to each other and the natural world has been concretized by religion into a brick to throw at your neighbor. Metaphors confused with fact, and truth and science are denied with conspiracy theories. We are surely at a crossroads. Our abduction into the COVID underworld has prompted some to ask these questions. What is really necessary in my life? What are my priorities? Do I need to consider making new ones? What do I really need? What is really important in life? Watching the federal government's response to the crisis has many asking, what's going on here? What's our priority, money or people? What comes first, economy, commerce, industry, and capitalism, or the health of our children, our families, our loved ones, and our elderly? As global commerce and industry shut down, we saw the ecological systems of the planet shift. Pollution lifted and wildlife returned to places they had not been in decades. It became very apparent nature will do just fine without us, and we are in control of so little. This pandemic has prompted millions to reassess our global future. If the pandemic has shown us all that we are all interdependent on one another to survive, well, what about the looming specter of climate change, world hunger, the increasing demand for energy, endless wars? This abduction of the entire planet, this unwilling descent from the gateway of home and hearth into the underworld, is the hallmark of a heroine's journey, inward and down, into the deepest parts of our psyche. From the micro to the macro, we are suspended in liminal space, beginning to recreate our relationships with each other and the natural world. This is the work of the conscious feminine. Maureen Murdoch writes that the essential work of the heroine's journey is to embrace the feminine nature and to heal the deep wound inflicted throughout history upon women and the archetypal feminine. This primal wound goes back to the ancient origins of patriarchy, its repression of women, and the consciousness or divine feminine archetypal energies in both men and women. Looking at the last 6,000 years or so of humanity's journey and its embrace of patriarchy as a cultural structure, we can see the systemic repression and destruction of the symbols, expressions, representations, and embodiments of the sacred feminine. The heroine's journey invites us to go deep within ourselves to begin a cycle of healing, to forge a balanced relationship between masculine and feminine archetypal energies in psyche. We have an opportunity to rethink our lives and what kind of world we want to live in. We have an opportunity to imagine and create a new world built on a foundation of global relationship, compassion, equality, and codependence. From home, the realm of Hestia, the sacred hearth, the center of life and nurturance and fire, we are being invited to reclaim intuition, creativity, compassion, relationship, empathy, eros, and a sustainable relationship with our planet. We are on a collective heroine's journey. Who will answer the call? If we would make the ascent back to the upper world from the underworld with our boon, we must return the way we descended through the gateway of home. To heal the wound, the conscious feminine must be honored and reestablished in our experience and way of life. We must embrace all the attributes of the feminine and the ecological balance of nature if we are to survive. By answering this call, we begin to heal the wound and take our next steps towards the integration and the balance of the masculine and feminine energies within us. Only then can we create the hieroskemos, the sacred marriage, in the world as well as in our lives. If we can ascend from the underworld through the shrouding mists and climb over the rocky crags of the Valley of Avernus, if we can stay the course, keep moving forward, and don't look back, we may emerge from the underworld hand in hand with our Eurydice, with the first lines of a new myth and renewed hope for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was amazing. I am so drawn to how you give each of us a purpose in this mythic journey that we are on right now, and so beautifully illuminating current events in such a eloquent and gorgeous way. Thank you. Thank you. Praise in the chat. And if we can drop Andrea's website in the chat, it's drandreasleminski.com. Thank you so much.